Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. During the Coach B era, we have not enjoyed much success at the Kohl Center or against Wisconsin, period. That continued on Saturday as we lost an ugly affair to the Badgers. On our game day segment in just a minute, we'll be joined by Brendan Quinn from the Athletic Detroit with his take on that performance and much more. First, a few of my thoughts to get us started. I think we all knew Michigan would not go undefeated this year. On the road in the Big Ten, there is not much room for error. If you have a subpar night, you will get beat. That was the case in Madison on Saturday. Tonight, Minnesota pays a visit to Chrysler, and we need to bounce back. It won't be easy. This is a team that beat Wisconsin at the Kohl Center just a couple of weeks ago. Then on the weekend, we head to Bloomington for a rematch with Indiana, and that will be tough. There is still a lot of basketball to be played, though. I suppose my only concern is the team peaked early and maybe has already hit their ceiling. On the other hand, we have a lot of young talent that is developing on this team, and it's possible the best is yet to come in February and March, and with Coach B teams, that is usually the case. That's what makes it fun. It's a journey, so let's enjoy it. My guest today says he thinks Michigan will be in the thick of the race all the way. Brendan Quinn from the Athletic Detroit is up next, here on the Michigan Man, on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Here with us on our game day segment this week to talk some Michigan and Big Ten hoops, Brendan Quinn from the Athletic Detroit. Great to have you back with us, Brendan.
Mike, always a pleasure to speak with you. I think it's the first time in 2019. Glad to be back on the show, man.
Well, always a pleasure. And yes, it is our first time, and there's a lot to talk about. And of course, over the weekend, it was interesting. We knew it would happen sooner or later. Michigan was not going to go undefeated. They were going to lose a game. And they did Saturday in Madison. And as often happens when you play up there with that style of a basketball team, it was an ugly game to watch, wasn't it?
It was. It was a bit of a meat grinder. I'm standing there before the game, watching warm-ups and stuff. Luke Yaklich wandered over, and we kind of traded some small talk. And at one point, he just kind of looked around and said to no one in particular, you know, this is going to be a grind. And it was. I mean, they knew it was coming, and that's the style of play. You know, Wisconsin wants to make you work for everything. Both teams play low possession games, so it's going to be a little bit slower. So when you match up with each other, it's going to be even slower than slow. And Saturday's game ended up being, or Sunday's game. I don't remember which day, but I think it ended up being 66 possessions, which is pretty slow. And yeah, I mean, you had to work for every basket, and Michigan tried to steal some here and there with getting out and running a little bit more than they do. It resulted in a couple of uncharacteristic turnovers, and that's what Wisconsin does when they're at their best. Is they just kind of frustrate you, and they play, you know, tough on the ball defense, and they draw some charges. And they drew 4 against Michigan in that game, and it just builds and builds, and the frustration comes, and you know, that's how Michigan ends with a 10-point loss.
Well, as you said, Wisconsin needed that W bad. I think they had lost 4 of their last 6. And it's, as we've just said, it's no secret when you play them, it's a grind. Every possession counts, and you cannot, against them or anyone, turn the ball over 16 times, can you?
Yeah, it's you realize just how much you take it for granted almost, the way that Michigan is able to take care of the ball, especially just in recent history. One of the stats I dug out after the game was, you know, the statistic that doesn't get talked about often enough is turnover percentage. And that is percentage of possessions in a game that you commit a turnover. Michigan is usually in the top 10 nationally in that category. They are currently 8th, even with this weekend's game. But since 2010-11, Michigan had not committed 24% turnovers in a game, or had only done so 5 times in 310 games. And this weekend was one of those games. So it speaks to just how well they do in that area and just how rare it is for something like that to happen. And when a team is so dependent on that, when it goes sideways like that, it's going to be damn near impossible to win.
No, absolutely. And Coach Gard said after the game, you can't focus on just one player against Michigan. You just have to play team defense, which is not the strategy of a lot of teams. And their D, though, you have to give them credit. I mean, the 16 turnovers, very rare for a John Beilein coach team, but their defense was outstanding.
Yeah, they get up in you. They use Ethan Happ in a variety of ways. He's a smart player who moves well and has a tremendous amount of length and can get his hands on a lot of balls and is very disruptive. And they can move him around and kind of throw him on different people. Like at some point he was on Charles Matthews and all that length. Ethan Happ is 6'10". You put a 6'10" guy on Charles Matthews, like he's not used to that. So he's a guy who they can move around and put in a bunch of different spots. And between that and a guy like Brad Davidson, who will kind of is a bit of a gnat and will harass guys on the perimeter. And Demetric Trice can, he moves well and he can play some solid defense. They just get you all over the place. And then on the other side, they just had. Michigan really wanted to limit Wisconsin's threes, and they did so. But the threes that Wisconsin did get came from unexpected guys and at really inopportune times for Michigan.
And Ethan Happ, I think everyone loves watching Ethan Happ. He's been such a great player for 4 years. A lot of folks think he is the best player in the Big Ten. But man, that free throw shooting of his, that's tough to figure out, isn't it?
It is, and you watch him go through warm-ups, and he makes shots. It's more so when he gets in games, and I think his form even changes in real time. It's a struggle, and Michigan obviously tried to go with the hack-a-hap strategy, which most teams do, and it didn't work out. Obviously with that foul call that caught some people off guard, but it was the correct call. I think if they had to play it again, they'd do the same thing. They started fouling Happ, I believe, with about just under 2.5 minutes left, and that sounds right to me. That's what I would have done. The first time they did get a foul called, he went 1 of 2, and you take that all day.
Well, when you're 17-1, fans don't focus often on problem areas for the team. Probably just think, hey, it was an off day in Madison Saturday. Offensively, though, do you see any red flags or issues of concerns with this offense moving forward? For
what you've seen in the last 2 games with teams who, even though, yes, Wisconsin plays greater team defense, it's clear, that Northwestern game and this Wisconsin games, teams are going to want Teske and Simpson to take those shots. And now John Teske's been playing really well, and Xavier Simpson has been playing really well. But if you can limit the shot attempts by the big 3, Poole, Brazdeikis, and Matthews, that's probably the best recipe for trying to take down Michigan. And in that game on let's get it right this time, Saturday,
right.
Brazdeikis and Matthews only combined for 10 shot attempts, while Xavier Simpson had 12 shot attempts. So, no offense to Xavier Simpson, he's having a hell of a year, but you can't have him taking more shots than Matthews and Brazdeikis combined. Like, that can't happen. So, Beilein's going to have to dial some things up. They're being defended differently, and they're going to have to find some ways to get those two in better positions to get the shots that come naturally to them.
Well, talking about Charles Matthews for just a moment, I mean, we know what he gives us on defense, and this just might be me, but I keep waiting for him to take the lead or break out on offense, but maybe it is what it is. Do you think he's ever going to develop into that kind of a player?
He had some moments early this year. Certainly, he was excellent in the Villanova game. I believe he had 19 in that one. The North Carolina game, he was excellent. He went for over 20 in that one. He's had times. I think it's often dependent on matchup, and it's also like, Michigan isn't really a team that has just one guy. It's a big ask to have someone average, or go and consistently put up 20 on this team, just because the field goal attempts are shared. They all go around. Jordan Poole's going to get his, Iggy's going to get his. John Teskey, if teams aren't going to defend the pick and pop well, he's going to take his shots and he's going to roll and finish because, him and Xavier Simpson have a really good thing going right now. And Isaiah Livers is going to come off the bench and get some attempts. So, I don't think he's ever going to be a consistent day in, day out volume shooter on this team. But, when the matchups call for it, he's someone to be utilized. But, so much of his production is based on those little mid-range shots, and it's a 50-50 shot often, so you're going to have to take the misses with the makes. And when he gets into those kind of spin cycle pivot moves that he does down there, sometimes he turns it into a bucket on one of those little fallaways, and then other times it seems like he misses 3, 4, 5 in a row, and it can grow increasingly frustrating. But I do think he has another level than he's played at right now. But it's for Matthews, it's as much about just keeping it consistent on defense, and he is doing that. The performance that he delivered against Romeo Langford a couple weeks back was outstanding, and he'll get another shot at that next weekend.
Well, the offense is, as we all know, has been very consistent so far this year through 18 games. Scoring is spread out. One night it's one guy, the next night it's another guy. But and you just touched on this, it seems like most good teams have a guy to go to at crunch time, delivers in tight games, takes over, especially late. We don't have that. Do you think that's going to be an issue or could be a problem down the stretch?
No, I think you're just going to – it doesn't need to be one guy each time. I think the most consistent answer will probably be Jordan Poole playing out of the ball screens. But, if you look back at some of the great Michigan teams of recent years, they've kind of been able to do it a little bit by committee. And I think Beeline feels more comfortable in that because, the key to any opposing scouting report is tendencies. And Michigan doesn't have, it certainly has some tendencies and some teams are identifying them. But, the fewer you have, the better.
Well, Iggy Brazdeikis has been better than I think all of us expected. How good do you think this kid can be, Brendan?
I think he is a guy who will be all Big Ten freshman team. He needs to expand his game a little bit. His jump shooting early on caught some people off guard, but is kind of returning to maybe what expectations were. In this 5-game Big Ten stretch since the beginning of January, he's only made 2 threes, and he's 7 for 22 overall in Big Ten play. So some of those games where he was, kind of banging 2 or 3 threes a game, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle for how good of a shooter he is. And what you're seeing right now and some of in his production, I think, is keyed on the way he's being defended, in that he's not really a guy that Michigan can kind of put into a ball screen, let him create the way Jordan Poole can, because he doesn't quite see the floor that way yet. And, Iggy's a freshman, and it's a lot to ask for a guy to be able to do some of these things of playing in ball screens and picking up assists. He only has 3 assists in this 5-game stretch as well. This is stuff that kind of comes with time. Now, whether Michigan has the luxury of being able to see that development, that remains to be seen, because there's a very good chance that next year that occurs at the next level. But for a guy like him to do what he's done this year has been pretty outstanding. But he's going to have to figure some things out, and I think it's going to take a lot of film study for him to really understand what's going on with how teams are checking him. Here with us on our Game Day segment this week is the outstanding basketball writer Brendan Quinn from The Athletic Detroit. Brendan, a couple of weeks ago, back in The Athletic, you did a great piece on how important Isaiah Livers is and could be to this team. Mm-hmm. Could he still be that X factor that gives Michigan the edge again in February and March? Well, yeah. When you have a guy who can come off the bench and give you a different look, and especially with Brazdeikis, showing a bit of a dip as a 3-point shooter, it is a nice luxury to have, to be able to put Livers out there, put him in the corner, and it's a much better option to stretch out the defense, because you got to keep teams honest. And if you can put Livers out there, teams have to respect him. He's shooting 45% on threes this year. So he's a guy to make big shots. And I if anything, I'd like to see a little bit more of him utilizing his athleticism and going and attacking the basket. Sometimes he does default a little bit to kind of a more passive approach of, taking a floater or taking a step back or just passing out of it when he gets a head of steam going to the basket. He is as good of an athlete as this team has. So, the dunk that he had in transition at Wisconsin kind of showed that off, and I'd like to see more of that. And he's already an excellent defender. He's one of the team's primary communicators on the defensive end in terms of when Luke Yaklich is calling things out. A lot of that communication is kind of goes through and is translated and communicated by Simpson, Livers, and Teskey. Those are the big three in that area. That's what Luke Yaklich will tell you. He's a hugely important player. It's been interesting that with the emergence of Teskey, we've seen them kind of go away from some of the stuff that seemed pretty exciting early on. And one of those things is when they would go with that small ball lineup with Livers at the 5, I think that's still one of the most interesting looks they can throw at teams, but they haven't really done it too much. So I'd be kind of curious to see if that comes back at all over the second half of this conference season.
I mean, you can bring Isaiah off the bench and plug him in just about anywhere other than point guard,
sure,
as you mentioned, and who knows? I doubt that we'll see him at the point ever. But that sort of speaks to the depth on this team too. A lot of fans you talk to say they're a little bit worried. And you get into February, you want your rotation set. Do you think it's okay now, or do fans make too much of that you need to go 7 or 8 deep?
I don't buy into that. I think a proper kind of college rotation, when it really gets down to it, is 7 or 8 guys. That's what Villanova did, and things worked out just fine for them. That was most of the last 3 years. That's pretty much what they did. And Michigan for the most part was the same way. Now they thought they were going to have a little bit more depth last year with a guy like Jerron Simmons and things like that, and maybe thought that a guy like Ibi Watson might kind of emerge a little bit more. But really, at the end of the day, it was your starting 5, Duncan Robinson and Jordan Poole and Teskey giving you some minutes here and there. People forget that Teskey certainly showed flashes last year, but if you go back and look at the NCAA tournament, he played, I think, 7 minutes against Villanova. He played like 2 or 3 minutes against Loyola. He had some games where he touched 12 minutes or 15 minutes or even 20, but it wasn't all the time. So, the depth has never been something that, I think has kept John Beilein awake at night by any means.
Well, as Coach B said after the game,
other than injuries.
That's true.
I'll tell you that.
That's true. Very
right.
True. Good point. Coach B said after the game on Saturday, no time to dwell on it. A lot of teaching moments from that loss to Wisconsin. Tuesday, we're taping on Monday, so the show airs on Tuesday, but Minnesota pays a visit tonight. They're 14-4, beat Penn State in a close game over the weekend. They don't have a point guard, a true point guard, but they are a tough group to play too, aren't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're talking about a team that won at Wisconsin, so and has probably a pro in Amir Coffey, and has one of the better low post players in the conference in Jordan Murphy. Has a what's considered a pretty high level shooter in Dupree McBrayer, although his numbers this year are not that great. I think he's at about 33%. They are a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. Kind of, you see them play. They win at Nebraska, or I'm sorry, I think that was a home game. Yeah, they beat Nebraska at home in December, and then started January with a road win at Wisconsin. And it's, oh man, look at Wisconsin. Look at Minnesota. They're gonna make a run here in the league, and then they go and drop. I think their one loss was home against Maryland, and then lost by like 27 at Illinois, where you're just like, how is that even possible? So, people obviously question their coaching. I think that's always kind of been a thing here. So Personally, I am not high on Minnesota's chances coming into Chrysler with Michigan coming off of a loss, because one of the things, and it's not to feed a narrative too much, but when it really comes to Michigan, I think that one of the keys for what makes this team really good, when it's really good, is when they're a little bit pissed off, mm-hmm. and when they take things personally. And because when they play that way, that's when it really shows on defense. And when they play that level of defense, it feeds to better offense. And that's when you really see the team take off. This is not a team that can go out and play pretty and just drop 80 on you and run you out of the gym. Like, it's not who they are. They are a team that needs to go out and outwork you and beat you up and harass you, both out front with Xavier, on the wing with Charles, down low with Teskey. That's when they're at their best. And when they play defense like that, it inevitably results in better offense, because the other team gets worn down, and then Michigan kind of can take control of the game, of the pace, of the rhythm and all that stuff, mm-hmm. that kind of comes with the flow of a basketball game. That's when they take control. Like, that's what they did, in my opinion, when they were at their best early this year against Villanova, against North Carolina, against Providence.
Well, we aren't quite at the midway point in conference play, Brendan. Pretty close. But right now, from what you've seen, and I know it's what you've seen the most of is Michigan and Michigan State, but from your vantage point, is there one team you've seen play so far that you can say, or might say, yeah, this is the team to beat?
As of January 21st,
mm-hmm.
when we're recording this thing, I would say it's Michigan State. They are playing as well as maybe anyone in the country today, right now. As you know, as I know, as everyone knows who really follows college basketball, that this could look very different in a month.
Right.
Put it this way. If Michigan State and Michigan played in November, Michigan would have won. If they played in December, Michigan State probably would have won. If they played now, I think it would be an absolute war. So who's best right now? It's Michigan State, and they get a chance to take down Maryland tonight at home. And if they go and put it on Maryland, they are in really good shape in the league. And then the rest of this week is a road game at Iowa and a road game at Purdue. If they come out of this stretch 3-0, I'm not saying they clinch the league by any means, but they would have a really nice vice grip on the league standings if they get through this thing at 3-0. That would put them at 10-0 overall at the midway point, and that would be really, really impressive. Now, that's going to be extremely difficult to beat Maryland at home, win at Iowa, win at Purdue. But the way that Michigan State's playing right now, even shorthanded, I think they are fully capable.
As you said, it could look completely different at this time next month in late February, and it is going to be a grind. It's a long, long season. Do you like the 20-game schedule?
It's so crazy that it seems like it should be later in the year.
Yeah.
Right now, and there's still 13 league games to go for Michigan State at least. But I don't think no one's played more than 8 conference games. So yeah, there's a long ways to go. But these teams are going to really beat the hell out of each other, and it'll be curious to see come NCAA tournament time if it takes a little bit of an extra toll. I'm not saying that the 20-game schedule will lead to everyone being eliminated in the first weekend, but it's a tall task to get through this thing, and whoever does will certainly be well tested. And you win the Big Ten championship in a 20-game schedule. No fan will want to hear this, but you could argue that that's about as impressive as making a Final Four or something. But of course, no one will see it that way. Do I like it? I don't know, because I kind of I'm not from here. I'm not raised with Big Ten basketball. I look at things more on a little bit of a national level or other way around. Like I love mid-majors, and the way I look at it is these power conferences going to 20-game schedules will inevitably eat into opportunities for mid-majors. So if that's the residual, then I'm not a fan of it. But as someone who covers Big Ten basketball, it's better to watch more Big Ten basketball, if that makes sense.
Coach B was talking, I think a couple of weeks ago, someone asked him, how many losses do you think the Big Ten champion will have? And he sort of threw out, it could be 12-8, which is, that's hard to believe. But, the old axiom is you need to split your road games and win at home, which if you split your road games, that's 5 losses.
I think it'll probably be, I think the champion will come out at 15-5 or 16-4. The positive effect of this 20-game schedule is that the teams, most teams did take care of business in non-conference play. It was a really strong non-conference showing from the league as a whole. And when you have that combined with a 20-game schedule, the league itself will probably produce a bid or two in the NCAA tournament that it might not have had otherwise. Put it this way, a team like Maryland that had a non-existent non-conference schedule, they just didn't play anybody. If they go 11-9 or 12-8 in the league, like they're in. And whereas last year Nebraska, on a down year in the conference, won I think it was like 12 games or 13 games and didn't make the NCAA tournament. So this year, by the league being overall healthy in non-conference, I think it will get itself 8 or 9 bids in the NCAA tournament.
Well, we're seeing a lot of great basketball in the Big Ten so far this year. Approaching the midpoint, best is yet to come in February and March. Our guest today has been Brendan Quinn from The Athletic Detroit, one of the very best basketball writers out there in the U.S., and we hope to get you back soon. Always a pleasure, Brendan. We thank you for your time, and we look forward to that next visit.
Yes, sir. In February. I look forward to it. Very good, Mike. Thanks, man.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, women's basketball picked up a huge win over the weekend at Chrysler, beating Ohio State in come-from-behind fashion 62-58. Up next at home is Indiana on Thursday. They are 12-7 overall, 3-4 in conference play. Hockey will be back in action at home on Thursday against Penn State. They are 8-9-6 overall, 4-5 in Big Ten action. Our free show app is available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. You can also hear us on iHeart, TuneIn, Spotify, and Wolverine Sports Radio. Later this week or sometime next week, I hope to have our January Extra ready to go with Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. That's right, we're going to try to get back into our football recruiting updates. I'll give you a heads up on Facebook and Twitter when that is ready to publish. That will do it for now, though. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until next time, take care. And as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!